Hello, Sarah.
Hello, Daniel.
Nice to have you here.
I'm very happy about this invitation.
In the past, I had to worry about saying everything important in the first 15 seconds so that people would keep watching. Nowadays, in the age of AI, I always make snippets afterwards and post them on TikTok, Instagram, and Shorts. I use everything to make as many people as possible more knowledgeable. I started with math and talked about this this AI pretty early on. And these days, I always say sometimes you just have to tell the same thing long enough until it's right. Now, the whole world is talking about AI.
Like fashion, trends return. Wear something long enough and it becomes stylish again.
I don't think it's going to disappear. I first noticed you when you were on the podcast with Christoph Magnussen. Shout out to him at this point. Christoph, I want to be on your podcast again too. Greetings. We've already talked, and he has always approached such topics very early and very consciously. And there are so many topics, and I found your journey very exciting. You're actually not originally a technician. We'll talk about that in a moment as well. I find storytelling in general very interesting these days because with all the breakthroughs in AI, what will still matter in the future? What actually still matters? Storytelling is a big topic. I saw another post from you. I don't know what Anthropic or whoever, or Netflix, I have no idea, the storytellers. Yeah.
$1.2 million?
Here, guys, yeah? You get 1.2 million if you do storytelling.
Yeah, for communication people.
It's really unbelievable. And you just mentioned a word there. The topic of communication is pretty important. We really have a lot planned. First of all, my question, what was the time like before this whole AI hype? In 2016, you were already working with chatbots at Telefonica. I'll backtrack. You were in Wermelskirchen? That's what I did. Yes. Yes, at the Remscheid Generalanzeiger. Yes.
Oh, you've gone that far back in my resume.
I'm from Remscheid.
Oh, no.
I graduated from high school in Remscheid in 2001. I was looking on LinkedIn and, well, I'm a hardcore stalker. I don't let AI do everything. So I saw Remscheid Generalanzeiger. Funny. What did you do there?
Yes. So exactly during my school years, I wrote guest articles there from time to time. I think I did my internship there. And after that, they said, oh, for a student or a pupil. Yes, at that time, what I produced there wasn't so bad at all. And then I wrote there once in a while about topics that interested me because I was also pretty well connected in Wermelskirchen. So about theater and sports and culture, I wrote about topics that I thought were cool. Yes.
And back then, things were still okay, right? Yeah, no. 50,000 new tools every day. What do I need to do or test? Am I still involved? Should I let it go? Are the servers or the earth in trouble? Is everything bad or good? We'll talk about that later too. Where is it all going? And then you went to college, and what did you study?
Media and cultural studies in Düsseldorf, yes. And I said, I kind of feel like I always thought I would become a journalist or a reporter, a presenter, something like that. I was the classic generation of something with media. Yes. So this grouping of years, incredibly high GPA requirement for a communications degree, like 1 point something, 0.5 or something. It was just so absurd because the demand was so high that suddenly this media design direction became really hyped. But it wasn't like there was this clear plan of this is the one dream job, and that's why I'm starting a specific degree now. And my parents threw their hands up in the air and said, yeah, humanities, she'll end up being a taxi driver in Düsseldorf and so on. So they were really worried and were kind of like, oh, but with a good high school diploma, you could do something proper. Yeah. I think it worked out pretty well. Yeah.
And now you're an AI future thought leader. So how did that journey happen? How did you get there? Especially as a non-techie, so people know that you really understand the whole subject. Can we briefly go through it? You weren't at a small company, you were at Telefonica, yeah. And then in 2016 you were there, helped build a chatbot. Exactly. 2016, so I'm imagining that now, that's 10 years ago.
Yeah, without large language models. That was quite a lot of work. So the idea came up. I started working in online services in 2015. So the classic FAQ pages that you knew from 2015 were still pretty basic. It was kind of a digitalization push. And everyone was thinking, how can we make our web portal better? And I spent a year working on rebuilding it. How do existing customers actually find the best and fastest solution when they have a problem with their SIM card or their contract? Sure, yes. They also wanted to steer people away from the hotline, save costs, and push for digitalization. I did that for a year, built it up from scratch, and then the idea was basically born. Yes, it's all well and good that we're doing this in a more structured way with ClickFlows now, but actually, in the best case, we only have one question that has one answer. And actually, I don't want to know something generic that applies to all customers, but rather something that's just for me personally. And then we started the first chatbot project together with a startup through Telefonica's accelerator program. We said, okay, what if there is an input field and I enter exactly my question there and get exactly one answer?
And how did that work? Very, very manual.
Exactly. How was it received?
Let's start. How was it received?
So basically, internally, it was always like, yes, innovation. You always have to innovate a bit. Yes, well, it wasn't really taken seriously yet. It was this side innovation project that had a bit of budget. But no one really believed that it would actually become something. So back then, I told the customer service director, the future is conversational or something like that, whatever this means. But here are 6 months' time, and right in the end, it was always a bit under the radar. So it was always an unnoticed contact channel that appeared somewhere as a chat bubble. And of course, we also did a lot of internal marketing. Because in the beginning, we have to go back 10 years. It wasn't like the chatbot understood everything right away. And all of us who might still remember from that time, like Facebook, spots that suddenly popped up from everywhere. There were still a lot of dead ends back then. Or the answer, I'm sorry, I didn't understand you. Or something came up that didn't fit at all. Because with natural language processing, which is basically the predecessor technology, we used to manually write down sentences in huge Excel spreadsheets with former call center employees, thinking of all the ways a question could be asked. For example, you're asking about a bill. Not everyone says, I would like to download my bill, but there may be 1 to n different ways the customer could ask that. And we managed and created all of that manually with human intelligence in large Excel databases. And who knew that better than those who were regularly on the phone and spoke with customers every day? That's how these first steps came about. We said, hey, this expertise, and not just the processes, but also how our customers actually speak. Back then, we couldn't analyze that as well as we can now. Who knows that better than those who have done it for years? And they were the first ones who never became call center employees again. Instead, they opened up new career fields with us, together with us, and moved into the AI initiatives.
That's quite interesting. I always try to switch a bit. Yes, to the present time and then back again. Because it's all about data and it's all about structured data. Because everyone is shouting, should I use Codex or should I use Claude or should I use Gemini or maybe a Chinese model? Well, if you haven't prepared your data properly, none of it matters. And this human component, how should we view it nowadays? Yes, you also focus on human-centered AI. So how is that? How would it work today? Human component versus data component?
Well, I think that AI, especially if we think specifically about customer service, where there are a lot of unstructured conversations, AI can definitely help today to identify patterns more easily. Because what does AI do? You've likely explained pattern recognition here many times already. And if we now have hundreds of conversations, thousands of conversations that go through every month, which are unstructured, but in the first step, we let the AI structure them and ask, what are the actual patterns? Yes. In customer calls, the sentiment, so how are the customers feeling about which topic, like what might be particularly critical and where do we need an escalation? And I think that's where the human factor comes in, that we make the decisions. In business processes, what are the things where we recognize in the patterns that these are actually always the same questions? And if we had an automated use case for that, then the customers would be totally satisfied with it. And what are actually the topics where there are critical escalation issues? Either because they are technically complex, because we couldn't even implement them technically with automation yet, but where do we also say that human-to-human communication is needed there? And to identify that, and then to say, we are deliberately choosing human-to-human interaction. Even if we could automate it, But we want to be a loyalty company. We want this human relationship. Maybe we can also achieve upselling and cross-selling through that. So there are also many business cases behind it. And I believe that AI can help bring structure so that we as humans can then decide where we automate and where we don't.
I'm asking because just recently I flew back from Switzerland and then I automatically received an email saying, yes, the flight is cancelled. And I was like, great, just perfect. And of course, I called the hotline right away. And then, of course, it started immediately. Yeah, well, and there was no person. Instead, a process started. And I just thought to myself, I won't name the airline, but my goodness, there was very little effort put into it. Yeah. And to recognize me as a customer who is maybe a bit emotional right now, but to address that. And that brings us to the topic of emotionality. How do you manage that? So normally, especially as an airline, these are just my thoughts. The first thing I thought was they probably said, well, there's one person who freaks out, but the rest just accept it and don't use the service. And I think that can't be right.
We want to, I don't know if you want to mention any brand here, but I can if you want me to.
You can mention brands, just say anyone.
I know a big brand, an airline that has an outstanding text bot. They've already won a lot of awards with their chatbot, but they haven't dared to try voice yet. And they still have a classic, what's called a DTMF system. So press 1, press 2, press 3. Which already drives me crazy these days. And many people, especially non-experts, can't even understand it anymore. Why do we have a numerical system in this voice system, when on the one hand we speak with HTTP and can somehow already build emotional connections? That works too. This extreme professionalization is a major challenge in Germany. Many avoid using the hotline for this reason, opting instead to slightly improve processes while sticking to the I choose from a menu approach. And that's actually the biggest thing. That makes me much angrier than if I didn't even have the option at all and couldn't say yes. I think that many people, when it comes to this hybridization, say, I'm not ready to try an LLM yet because it's very, very complex. But because of these long journeys you have to go through by clicking, and I have to enter something here again, it's essential. So I think the customers are much more frustrated. And that's even though technically it's already possible.
Okay, we'll come back to that in a moment because for me, what I'm identifying right now, since I also give a lot of talks and so on, I'm a sparring partner at companies. That's the implementation of this AI. So what are we actually doing now? Which processes are we looking at? Like everyone is talking about agents and doing everything. How do we even set this up? I'm just going to go back for a moment. Now you did it at Telefonica, and then it was there, the chatbot. How did it go on from there? What year are we in now? 2017, 18?
Exactly. So in 2017, we had the tech, or 16, the tech spot with the startup. And then Telefonica is a global telecommunications provider, and O2 and Blau and all the brands we know in Germany are basically just subsidiaries. And then globally from Spain, they had the same idea to say, hey, we're creating a global platform from Spain, and we just need to develop it once and done. And that's more cost effective. And then all the country's subsidiaries can use these platforms. From a business case perspective, that sounds really good. But the Brazilians, who are mainly prepaid, ask different things and have different requirements for an interface than the German postpaid customers, with contracts and with routers and with 5 mobile SIM cards. And that was already very, very complex. That means one of my strategic missions was to detach us from Germany. To say we have over 1 million customer contacts per month, we can't use a standardized platform that we don't have, be able to adapt it. And exactly, then we basically set out on this path to create an omni-channel platform. So not just running a chatbot on it, but we also said we're going to take on voice as well. And then when was that? 2019. Wow. Yeah.
Voice 7 years ago?
Yeah. And exactly, and we were the very first, definitely in the telco sector in Germany, who replaced the number-based menu system and moved to speech recognition. And the interesting thing was that for years we had trained customers to speak in single-word sentences or to click. And when we started and launched with open speech input and said, please tell me in 1 sentence what it's about, then we got full sentences. We trained linguistically And all the customers kept saying, bill, mobile, router, yes, yes. And there and then it became even more clear to me, right? That was the second milestone kind of in my career where I realized it's not just about technology, we're changing behavior through technology. We have to look at it psychologically, how we actually interact, how our communication is between human and machine, and how people behave. And just because we've now implemented something technically doesn't mean our customers will immediately get used to it. So how do I need to adapt the technology? And because we were already working with speech flows, we were able to ask follow-up questions and so on. So it was okay that at first only single word sentences were being asked. But yes, we were the first ones who were able to consistently offer the same virtual assistant across WhatsApp, Facebook, Chatbot, and Hotline, with all the new cases, with blog integration, with personalized queries and forwarding, especially then on the hotline, forwarding to the employee.
And how were your processes, if we talk later about future skills, like teamwork, questioning things, leading teams, tackling problems, finding first solutions in a sprint, etc., etc. You, as I said correctly, are not a techie, right? You didn't code or anything. So how was that? How was the work? So you first had a startup involved and then continued and then.
Exactly. And then I was basically always in this business strategy position at the beginning, still because we were such a small team, I was basically the product owner. So I wrote all the requirements and that brought me closer to it. And because I was involved in the AFQ, that is the tendering process, I worked very closely with our IT department. Afterwards, we also worked in a kind of Spotify model. So we had squads. So we had an agile development track where there were shared goals, and we had a tribe leadership team. And I basically had 2 IT colleagues with me in the leadership team. So there were 3 of us. Not just IT KPIs and business KPIs that are tracked separately somehow, but I was also responsible for maintenance and basically all IT KPIs. Performance of the platform, just like my IT colleagues, were responsible for our productivity KPIs and cost-saving KPIs, so we had accountability on both sides. And exactly, and because I was involved as a product owner right from the start, I learned a lot about the technology. I also did further training at Frankfurt Business School, Business for AI and so on. So I still tried to continue with a parallel track of further training, but a lot was simply learning by doing on the job, talking to the vendors. And right, and then because it grew so quickly, this strategy position developed that I was really focused on looking ahead. Like, yes, we have agile development now, that's our current setup, but what will it look like tomorrow?
And you mentioned somewhere, where did I read that? Let me check my AI. I think you just pinned it on Instagram in your Who Am I section, and you listed different things there, and somewhere it says that you never wanted to be self-employed or start your own business. Yeah, you said that at some point, right? Yeah, never. And at some point you did take that step after all. So how was that phase for you? Because I also remember the last few years when there was this real startup hype and everyone had to become self-employed. I always say that's not for everyone. Sometimes it's actually good for you not to do it. And even today, yeah, I still see it. On Instagram and so on, everyone is like, I'm building my AI agency in 365 days to 7-figure revenue and everything is possible. And if you just do it, yeah, that's right. But don't forget the big companies. Secure environment, structures, opportunities. So how was it the phase from you could lead teams and grow bigger to becoming self-employed? What happened there? So yeah.
Well, exactly. I kind of felt like I had already played through that story once. So I built up several teams from both a functional and people management perspective. I was always kind of on this fast track, like HR was always watching, like what's actually happening here, really. I wrote my own roles that just didn't exist before. In the end, I was a manager for AI and automation, and that was simply a position I came up with myself.
And manager, when was that? I always ask for details.
So exactly, well, I took on the leadership position in 2020, 2020.
20 minutes for everyone, 2020 exactly. As I said, did I come up with a fancy title myself? Or said, then we need a new organization in 2020 manager for AI and automation?
We want that, and then we also need people who focus on it. Exactly, and then came the point, it was like that. A few months after the ChatGPT launch, I was, of course, in all the board meetings and explained ChatGPT there. So that was like the classic phase of what's happening right now, hype, and no one really knew how to categorize it. And then we did a POC as well. We then used the OpenAI API to run our chatbot in the test environment for the company, just running it on an LLM. Exactly, and somehow in parallel to this exploratory phase and all the explaining, and that's when I realized how we actually talk about AI in Germany. And that was exactly the first half. The first half of 2023 was, of course, we talked about budget, infrastructure, technology, and I affectionately call them the tech bros, who then took the stage in a relatively short amount of time. And I thought, yes, all valid points, but you're missing the point, because I'd already been talking about it for 8 years. What happens when AI is integrated into our lives? And not just a little bit as a chatbot, but deep integration and influence on our everyday lives, our communication, our learning, our thinking. And right, that wasn't addressed at all. And then this thought and this desire kept growing. Actually, I'm really excited to be a part of this, and I want to help influence it. And yeah. And somehow I was 32 then, and it was kind of the point where I thought, I think I have to do this for myself now. I told myself I'm going to do it now. After nearly 10 years at Telefonica, which was a great time, I'm leaving with wonderful experiences. It was truly enriching. I found my passion. I never would have thought that I would find APIs, AI flows, data flows somehow cool. I only learned all these things there. So I'm really, really grateful. But I also have to say, it's also nice to close a chapter like that. It came from a desire not to move away from something, but towards something. And I had to make that possible for myself. And then I said, I'll give myself a year. I'll see if I enjoy it, if it works out. I had to keep telling myself, and my husband was like, hey, if it doesn't work out, there will probably always be a way back in some form or in corporations with my profile. And now it's been almost 2 years, and I can say that so far, well, I haven't really thought about going back very often. It was 2 years ago, I mean, in the summer.
2024. Okay, just so we have the date, always around end of 2022, because the iPhone moment was also when AI was among us, testing, and 2024.
Yes, exactly.
And what did you think you would do now? How do you make your money?
Yes, well, the idea was, you have to, so I started my own business, I quit my job, and then I went on a trip around the world with my husband. Then, while unemployed, I started my business. That's interesting because the employment agency declared it a startup born out of necessity. For whatever reason, it didn't really feel that necessary or urgent, but okay. In my consultation, I was asked if it was a good idea since I was in my mid-30s and whether I wanted children. Or I say yes. I find it interesting. I didn't know that my self-employment and my entrepreneurship had anything to do with my ability to be examined, but that's a good point. She was actually quite surprised that I had something to say in response. I think it was more of a provocative, teasing question. But yeah, and the idea or this business plan was that I would use what I had learned over the years or what I was really good at to offer that as a consulting concept, a concept for everyone who hasn't gone through this phase or this journey yet. How do you build voice and chatbots to provide strategic support for that, kind of the topic of the organization of the future? Because what I did before, and yes, I still do that, but it's no longer the biggest part. Because then out of that desire to say, I don't do cold calling, I don't write anywhere like, hello, I'm Sarah, I do this, do you want to talk? I'm just not that kind of person. I said I want to create a space where people approach me. And for that, I have to present myself online in some way with my ideas and the topics I talk about. And then I started to share the topics I care about on social media, Instagram, and then LinkedIn. And that went relatively quickly, relatively well. And then suddenly this Instagram channel grew very quickly. Then, and as a result, completely different business topics have emerged by now than I could have imagined 2 years ago.
Can you talk about what a typical business topic is?
Yes. So, of course, the classic ones. I started a podcast together with a friend who also comes from the AI scene. from communications keynotes. I'm currently working on my own course, and of course I do strategy consulting. So there are, but also, or many workshops where Instagram has kind of become a sales channel, so to speak, even though it doesn't come across as salesy, because I never, in my buys,
Now, my course,
where I now say exactly buy here, exactly here. That's what it says in my profile, but I cover a range of topics there. And yes, exactly.
then we're actually at the topic. Do good content and the money will follow. Yes. That means I also found it interesting. Your intention is I come from mathematics. Explain simply. Yes.
To understand.
And that's also how I perceived you, AI. I'll say AI explained simply. And that's really your whole angle. Yes. And of course, you are then. I once saw a TED talk about what criteria determine whether you become successful as a company. I'll consider you as a company now, as a solo entrepreneur. It's timing. Yes. So if you had started an Instagram channel 10 years ago, AI explained simply, no sales, that's nice, but that's it. A few followers, because I still remember, I can still recall, you can even look it up on my channel back in 2016, 17. I was at the Fraunhofer Institute with Professor Baukaj. Greetings to him. He'll be on my podcast again in 3 weeks because I sent him an email. I also told him in the email, sometimes you just need to repeat something until it becomes right. And I thought we talked about machine learning back then, processes where things are heading. And that was the time when DeepMind's Go program beat the best Go player. And for me, that was something. It won't be long now and then it'll start, but it just took even longer and honestly, nobody really cared. Yeah. And now, of course, is a time when there's a real need, and that's why that also brings me to the topic of education. Social media has also taken a certain direction. I follow this market very closely. What's happening there, and right now it feels like a peak moment for me. The business, fitness industry, they say you have to post a lot every day, 50 to 100 posts. And then I look at that and I really do look at it, but I want to understand what's going on there. Then there's someone at 11:01. I'm here right now, drinking my first coffee. At 11:05, I'm going to take a shower now. At 11:07, and I'm thinking, holy shit, how do you get a grip on that? And Daniel, stick to your approach. Yeah. And you really do stay true to your line. I can only recommend that you actually get tips soon about topics like AI, implementation, etc. And the numbers show it. I think you're at 90,000 followers now, steadily growing, so that's great. Congratulations again on that, and keep it up. And I actually hope that, there are an incredible number of AI-generated contents. There's already a bit being done. And now I think we're entering a phase where a lot of people are making 50 to 100 posts a day. And I can only hope that somehow it gets filtered and that in the end, only the good stuff is actually shown. You're active on Instagram. Are you also on TikTok, actually? Yes.
At one point we said, please use TikTok, we have it.
You need good pictures, trust me.
We all said, why don't I just post the videos there too? Yeah, I'm doing it. It's not that big yet, but yeah.
Do it. That's really, yeah. I'm also in a phase like that. That's true.
I just left and thought, what? 300,000, or how many followers do you have on TikTok?
On TikTok, yeah, that's awesome. It was mainly for math content, right? I noticed this process when people realized now you're talking about AI and it's kind of like 2011, 12, 13, 14 when it was so new in Germany that you could learn online with videos. Yeah. And back then it was already common in the US. Platforms had been around for a decade. Here, it's all just, what's he up to? And now I sometimes notice, oh, now he's suddenly acting like he's all about AI. And they don't even pay attention to the stories, to everything you've already done. But I stay true to myself and say it's just important to pass something on to the next generation. And I'll stick with this for now. You became self-employed. You got into it. You manage your channels. Yes. And of course, AI explained simply, in my analysis, conversational AI kept coming up. I really have to be careful with all these terms. Conversational AI. And then I also asked ChatGPT, Googled it, and asked Gemini, what is conversational AI? Yes, what is conversational AI? How would you describe it?
So originally, the term really comes from the traditional voice and chatbot field. That we have a conversation, but actually you could say it started with Alan Turing. And because then probably in 52, so that we have a conversation with a machine. Of course, that was much more exhausting, or rather not as natural as it is today. But here, so to speak, this conversational flow emerges, which is different from digital interfaces where we have to click and go through click paths. That an interaction, in other words, a conversation, is possible just like it used to be between people. And what does that involve? It's not just that I understand the content, what is being said, or my intention, but our language actually has an incredible number of layers. And now we have the opportunity to sit here facing each other. That means while I'm speaking and you hear what I'm saying, you see my face. I see your reaction. I might see sometimes you might look puzzled, then I can see that, how your eyes move. I see the body language. These are all things in conversation that at the beginning, when we came from the classic voice and chatbot environment, we said we don't have many of these layers. Maybe we have a tone of voice. We try to use artificial emotional intelligence to figure out how someone is feeling. But of course, AI is also expanding in that direction. The more data points we analyze about people, the better we can teach machines how to analyze additional layers of our conversations, conversational levels, and languages. And that's why originally the term basically comes from the idea that one person speaks, one listens, one responds, and then someone else speaks. I believe that this term has significantly expanded and continues to expand even more, because there is so much more to a conversation than just what is said.
I find that exciting because that's exactly the topic. Right now, of course, it's at its peak, and of course, a lot of it is always marketing. So, especially from the US, everything is different, everything is being transformed, everything is changing. And we've all been through these phases. I still remember at the end of the 2000s digitization, now everything is changing. And of course, a lot has changed, and those who recognized it early and made use of it benefited from it. But with AI, and I always try to point this out, AI is nothing new. Most people think it's only 5 years old, but Alan Turing noted it's been here since the 1950s. I always say it started in the US back then. People were thinking about how to make computers smarter. Then there was an AI summer, winter. And then various things had to happen. Computer power. The transformer model originated from Google, bringing everything together. Now everyone is waiting for the next major breakthrough like the transformer model that will have a big impact. Jan LeCun, Meta AI chief, said earlier, well, it probably won't work based on LLMs, you never know. But it really is transformative. When I look at the last 6 months, I listened to your podcast again with Christoph Magnussen, I think it was 3 or 4 months ago. So much has happened. Back then, I don't even know if you talked about ChatGPT, and Claude was, as I said in my talks at the time, just for the nerds. Bumano, negotiated, heavy cloud user, absolutely sensational. And now, of course, it's about, okay, if this doesn't stop and if it keeps going like this, of course, there are critical voices, and I understand them all. What does this cost? Will it solve everything? And what skills do we still need? And I think this topic of communication, communicating first, and from that a conversation becomes super exciting. And I wonder where this is going. And now I'm trying to build a little bridge to companies. So what should you actually focus on as a company? So how do you implement? Okay, I noticed this with many companies. Many, just like back then with digitalization, don't have a defensive attitude at first, and then you do a project like that, yeah, go ahead and do it. At the end of the day, there's shadow AI, everyone uses their private accounts, that's not it. And where should a company actually start if you have a typical medium-sized business? So, if they call you now, you come over, what should they do?
Yes, I think I would divide it into 2 groups depending on which industry they come from. Because I think there are a great many of them, especially medium-sized companies who only think about Copilot or, so to speak, about enabling or integrating AI for employees. But I also think that the potential often lies more in data preparation, data lakes, algorithms, predictive maintenance, and depending on which industry you're from, that you probably focus more on those AI use cases that aren't communicated as much, that you maybe take a closer look at those. That means the very first thing is to look at what are the big pain points in our industry? Where might we be losing money? Where do we see potential? Where have things gone wrong maybe? And you also have to do your homework first. In many medium-sized businesses, data preparation is a challenge. When discussing data lakes, many just mention data lake without further detail. Good to know, or whatever kind it is somehow. Are there still some servers under the desks with some kind of proprietary data on them? And that's an incredibly important asset. So I think that for many German medium-sized companies, that's exactly where the gold lies, because they have proprietary data they could work with. If you prepare it properly now, I think sometimes it also helps to take a step back. The topic of hype. I try not to let myself get blinded by this hype and not to already start discussing or talking about agent-based AI systems and the agents or employees. But first, you should take a look at what our landscape looks like, what our infrastructure is like, and what our data foundation is. And does it even make sense to implement these big fancy use cases right now, like external impact, voice and chatbots, or voice and chatbot enablement for employees? Or are these really just the things that can help us drive our business forward? And then we take the next step and look at increasing productivity. But I think that's very, very individual, and you really have to take a look at it. So you also need to be honest with yourself and take the time for this analysis. And then the second category, when you say, okay, we want to move towards AI integration, whether it's an AI platform like Langdoc, we want some kind of assistance for our employees so they can work faster in their day-to-day routines. So that you don't forget there either. A Copilot license is bought pretty quickly. But what has been talked about a lot in recent years, we saw the statistics last year, is that we now have thousands of employees here. Even a full license is still not cheap. It still costs 20 euros per person if you add it all up. And then they look at the usage and realize, well, 80% have only clicked it 3 times and are surprised, finding it strange. So how did it happen that no one used it, even though we have such a great tool now? Yeah, if you just set up a 30-minute call once and say, we now have the full license, you now have Copilot, well, we all know how effective that is. It's like before when you had an attachment with a PowerPoint or a PDF, no one looked at it either. We know this from sports, we know this from nutrition, we know this from all these things. It takes routines, it takes routine, and it takes at least 90 days for us to get used to something new, and it needs to be accompanied. And that's not how it works. We always have the pioneers, hopefully we all have them, the high performers who are always leading the way, and they use these things, but those in the middle, or maybe even those who say, I'm actually not really a fan of AI yet, we need to support them better. And this notorious change management, because nobody really knows what to do with it, then you just don't call it change management. But you still somehow have a strategy for teams. That's not like an all-hands fun thing, it's the little things. In the team meeting, maybe talk about which prompt worked or which one didn't, or maybe spend 10 minutes a week as a team talking about where things didn't work out, especially where something didn't go as planned. You also have to create space to complain sometimes and say, hey, this isn't working so well yet, because that's where the motivation to try out what could work comes from.
I'll stay on this level for now, the B2B level with companies, and I'll jump right in there. If someone is now asking themselves, why should I even do this? Why? So AI comes and goes. Why should I do this with my employees? First of all, and secondly, how do I really keep the employees engaged? Because I believe it only works through pain, but without causing panic and telling them, you can really see what's happening right now. Your job probably won't exist like this anymore, and you'll be gone. But don't worry, as the leader, this is a leadership issue.
For me, yes, totally.
I'm bringing you along now, and I'm empowering you. So first question, it hasn't been answered yet. Why? Well, let me say this. From your impression, is this just another hype, or is it really the case that the processes are transformatively different, even leading to new business models? We can probably do that. Yes. So I'm asking for a typical mid-sized company or member state. How do you convince them and their leader? That's what gets people on board. Yes, that's how it works.
Exactly. So I think the aspect that many people compare is this Gartner hype cycle, where it says, yes, we first have to, or it's just a hype, and then at some point we're on a plateau. I think the reason why this can't be transferred one-to-one to artificial intelligence is that we can't put AI as a whole technology onto this hype cycle. Instead, I think every new model or every new feature that we get right now goes through its own hype cycle and not the AI technology itself as a whole, which is of course also interesting because it's much more exhausting for us as humans to keep going through this roller coaster, which it kind of is. The emotions, the euphoria, the disappointment when you still don't believe it. This phase is very, very exhausting. And for that, if it's about conviction, so if someone still hasn't understood where the added value in AI lies, I think that's what it's about. It's really about this shift in thinking. Many people use cost savings as the entry point, but I'm moving away from cost. We want to go from cost to profit center. You already mentioned it, new business models. We all want to do more business, not less. But now, in the next 10 years, or in some industries, even in just 5 years, we're going to experience a massive, the first massive wave of retirements. And that's just the beginning. So we have fewer people, but we want to do more business and generate more revenue, but with fewer people. From my point of view, artificial intelligence is the only logical explanation and solution for us to even remain able to do business at all. We're not even just talking about the big topic of competitiveness, but we have to maintain what we're actually doing right now. We want to do more, but have fewer people. Industry, the next 5 years, I talked to industry representatives, and they said there's so much that's not documented. It's only in people's heads. I call Peter, Jürgen, and Suzanne, and those 3 people know it. If they retire in 5 years, then everyone will be left stranded. And of course, AI is being used there now, and that's not the fancy use case, but AI is simply being used as part of it. It's being used to document what's actually happening in the business. So that might be one argument, and the topic of AI leadership is incredible. Many people still totally underestimate it because the conversation is being driven by technical considerations. But what we actually need to understand is that we're talking about emotional safety in the workplace. Whoever feels safe. I have about 4 levels of feeling safe, which influence how I progress. Then I usually start at the very beginning, asking if I have permission to do something. We want everyone to move through these 4 phases so they participate and eventually become proactive. And the last phase, where we want to get our employees to, is actually the one where it's not just, I'll put it bluntly like this, the people who in English are called ambassadors, so those who represent what we actually want. But the last stage is actually those who develop together with us, but also question things critically because they have reached a certain level of knowledge and have an emotional, a psychological safety. So they know I can also express myself critically here because with the knowledge I have and how I develop it further, I can do that. I have a position, standing, and expertise, and that's where we want people to be. But that's a journey, and it doesn't happen overnight, and that's the responsibility of leadership.
Absolutely. I always say that too. I was on that side as well. It's understandable that some people, even in high positions up to the C-level, simply have a hard time making decisions, and America is leading the way. When the top executives step up and say, okay, we have 5 teams here and they have 5 proposals, and in the German European region, it mainly fails because of some compliance issues. And then after all, they go ahead and say, all right, build the prototype, launch it on the market, do a test phase, revise it, all right, then the thing is solved. And of course, we have to take care of data and so on. But that's just how it is. Something is still missing, especially from the leadership level. And then there are these leadership trainings. And then I ask myself, but what about all the employees? Because the employees also need to be brought on board. If you do a leadership training now, and in the worst case, it fails because the C-level organization says, no, we're not doing it. And if it does happen, then the employees say, why should I take part in this? And then we're at the topic of empowerment. So actually, you should, and I don't even want to look back again because I already said back then, I pointed out the book. Back then, I think AI First Company came out in 2020 and it said why you have to think of your business as AI first. Nobody cared. Here in Germany, because it just seemed so far away back then and even now, with exponential growth, everything is happening so fast. You have to get started now. And for me, I think the only way is that you don't just sit back and listen to the songs. That's how it is, and they are aware of it, not just of what is happening, but also of involving the employees. And then I come to the question, what would you say to the business owner now if he says yes, if my employees say yes? From employees in the general workforce all the way to the leader, the leadership team. If they now, let's say, spend 5 or 6 hours a week on further training, then that time is lost and they're not productive anymore.
Yes, that too. Yes, that was a valid point. Wrong approach. Yes. Of course, that's connected to time in the West, but that's for now. I would first praise that statement. Why? Because that would mean that it's already been understood that AI training and AI learning take time. Many organizations simply say they have it and will train their employees. They all have full-time jobs now, working 40 to 50 hours a week, and we're supposed to add AI on top of that. So there is. In recent years, we've seen a lot of studies showing that people feel overwhelmed because they feel like AI has become their second job, and they don't get any free time to learn, adapt, and get used to it. That's why it's already a good step when someone says, now there's one less day, because that means the free time has already been created. And yes, that's, of course, at first. So you could talk about transition phases, but it's also true that many of us have a really, really hard time prioritizing. Many managers say, oh yes, we've received a new project. I remember early on asking, I already have these topics and now more are added. What am I supposed to do with all of it? Can I drop something? Now my suggestion is maybe we can reduce it a little bit and so on. We also have to dare to stop doing certain things, right? Or just to understand what is simply not relevant right now. And for that, you need some courage and also some strategic foresight. And sometimes you need to make decisions faster. We don't need a fifth round for that. And then, because of course, I always say AI is a constant learning process. It's not over after a few training sessions. If you say you have an intensive phase where you're out one day a week, then ideally I come back with a completely different, hopefully new mindset about how I do my work. And when I go back to my 40 or 50 hours a week, they look completely different. And exactly. And I think that once you've gone through that, the question is always, what do we do with the newly gained time? That's a common question now that we're all more productive. I don't think that's going to happen. We are very good at keeping ourselves busy. Yes. And I think none of us will get bored. Because in this newly gained time, we won't just be taking more coffee breaks. That's also a really strange misconception that people think, oh, then my employees will do less work. We have to stop measuring people by their output and instead measure them by their outcome. And we must not make the mistake of pushing everyone to the maximum number of hours with even more projects. Because what we're doing right now with strategic and creative work is much more exhausting for the brain. Brain fry, we already have a word for it in English. When we get into overload, because we're doing so many strategic things at the same time. And maybe shout out to Friedrich Merz. Is this also a 40-hour concept? It's no longer adequate, a 150-year-old concept from Henry Ford, which actually just came from the factory era. So I think we really need to question a lot of things, how we work, how we deal with time, how we measure headcount, how we measure success. Like I think there are a lot of white-collar jobs, meaning people who work on laptops, that there's a new way of working and that this hour tracking system is outdated. Yeah.
How do you work then? Tell me about your daily routine. Which tools do you use?
Yes, so I use Claude. I also have a ChatGPT account. For a short time, I was kind of political about it. Like, that's actually not okay. But right now, I do all my classic business processes and business topics in Claude, and I've set up my skills, tone of voice, branding, and projects there. And ChatGPT is kind of my brain dump spot. Sparring, sometimes just a quick 5-minute voice message when my brain's done for the day and I need to vent. Voice messages, that just works much better with ChatGPT to get some structure in there and so that I can just say it out loud by myself. I also do a lot of personal stuff with it. So I've kind of divided it up. So ChatGPT is like my casual buddy, for example, for vacation planning or a quick bit of research. And Claude is really my business counterpart. Account. I have Claude Cowork, super cool, but I always make my AI agents at NNN a more sustainable one because, as you just said, so much is happening and it's happening incredibly fast. And many who are now moving everything to Claude and automating with Claude Cowork, I think that's cool right now. And I'm also getting into it myself. But we don't know what the world will look like in 12 months or what will happen with this company. And that's why I'm already trying to set things up a bit in terms of infrastructure so that I'm more independent there and, for example, use NNN or assistance via LangDoc so that you can switch models and try out models more quickly so you're not stuck in a vendor lock-in. Exactly. And then there are the classic things, of course, like content management and Notion. I think for solo self-employed people, there are a few classic tools that are always in the background. Notebook LM, of course, is something I use a lot, especially when I'm giving presentations or lectures. I say, hey, here's the notebook. These are all the sources and resources so that afterwards, ideally, everyone can engage with it even more. Yes, exactly. But that's relatively limited. So I have AI agents and I have assistants who do certain things and help me so that I can manage all the content somehow. But it's not like I have 20 tools in use. It's more about making conscious decisions.
But that's actually a good thing. That's why I let you say it, because in this information overload, people tend to hold back and do nothing instead of putting together a stack, which can also develop over time. Those are actually, do you know Silicon Valley Girl?
Yes, her too, yes.
Okay, so sorry. Fangirl,
I had my fangirl moment 2 weeks ago. Oh, you did?
you met her at Google I/O? Oh, wow.
Yes, and so I just had to, yeah.
Yeah, great. I followed that too. It was sensational. Yeah, I think she also has a very, very pleasant way about her, kind of a mix of things. Just having conversations and learning from them, implementing it in your own company, testing, giving great tips. In between and with the podcast, you also have a podcast. We can talk about that again in a moment. Just providing added value. There was I think the CEO of Box, I believe, who said, yes, that's just basic. Yeah, try Claude. But if you want to do this with 100 agents at the end of the day, you still have to orchestrate it. Not everyone here is the lead developer from Anthropic who can build and develop 100 agents in loops by themselves. We're just not there yet. And when you take such a mix, and also when it comes to learning, Notebook LM, I use it for learning among other things because it's just sensational. And then you mentioned LangDoc and NLN. That just reminded me. A question comes to mind even when I think of a classic German or European company, the topic of data security, GDPR in Germany. And here in Germany, we have companies like LangDoc or NLN that actually make sure your data is secure. Because if, let's say, a medium-sized company says, yeah, but I can't just give my data to ChatGPT. No. So what would you say to them now, just briefly? I would say, why?
Well, exactly. That's the main point, that ideally you only use the API in the cloud and then see what happens. Okay, of course, all of this has to stay with us, but we do have the possibilities because I think many people don't understand the difference between what is the end user product, which we as individuals have been using for 3 or 4 years now, like entering our vacation plans there, and what is the professionalization, the professional use of the models in the cloud. And then also, because I mean, we have LLMs, but actually in most cases, we only need them. We're also moving towards small language models. So we also need fine tuning in addition, that we understand what we're actually doing in our industry. And so the combination, our expertise, our fine tuning with the large LLMs in our cloud, or some even on edge. So of course there are options. But that's very diverse. For many, it's still a huge thing because many are just starting to move to the cloud. So they're actually still one step before that, thinking about which services they can actually use in the future and also understanding that it runs here in Frankfurt and not in the US. And you have to draw that line a bit. But the slower we are, as you just mentioned, the bigger the shadow AI becomes, with employees saying, I can see that I'm much faster now, and then there's a list of do's and don'ts that everyone has. So yeah, I'll do it. Don't enter any company relevant information. Yeah, if I've already asked similar questions 50,000 times with my private account and just said, yeah, it was just a big German energy provider. Yeah, okay, then the question is how secure that actually is. Yeah.
What would you recommend to an employee who's now thinking, I've realized this, I see what's happening around the world. If my company doesn't decide to take the issue more seriously, doesn't empower us at all levels, doesn't give us the freedom, just stubbornly continues their business as usual, who might also be afraid that their job might not be there anymore. Regardless, what would you recommend to the employee? How should they get started now?
Yes.
We're in June 2026 right now, just to date this.
Yes, perfect. So right now I'm the biggest advocate for so-called portfolio careers and the many, many careers. That is that we are allowed and should make changes, that we can keep learning and evolve in our professional profiles and within companies too. And everyone who is currently unsure about leaving their company because of the economic situation and thinks that's the safe harbor, I think that we have now understood that there was a lot of AI washing, especially in the US. We just mentioned the date. A few days ago, Sam Altman and Dario Amodei also backtracked and said that the job apocalypse isn't actually going to happen. That's why my recommendation is, if you right now, I'm speaking directly to you, the person who's listening, if you notice that you're not really enjoying your work anymore, I feel like doing something new. I want to continue learning. I want to apply what I've learned. I want to work at a future-proof company. Then my recommendation is, if it's not financed, maybe really invest in yourself and in further education. There are so many incredibly good training programs out there. But maybe also consider switching companies. Even if you've been there for 20 years, it's really great that you've been so loyal. But there are so many great companies out there in Germany that are really up to date, and they would be incredibly happy to have you because you bring engagement, passion, purpose, and expertise, domain knowledge to them. So I'm really trying to encourage everyone to be braver, no matter their age. Recently, a coaching client in their early 50s asked if they could still make a change. Absolutely, yes. Now is the time, because your domain knowledge is worth its weight in gold, and people, along with your AI enthusiasm, will welcome you with open arms. And yes, not just that. So move a little outside your comfort zone and create new comfort zones. Always just a little bit, never into the chaos zone, never into stress, but still I believe that right now we have a really, really cool time to do new things, to learn and to further educate ourselves. Yes.
I don't want to scare you. I just give you a few things here and there because coming from mathematics, I always say exponential growth. Watch a few lectures about it, about what's actually happening right now, what's happening in a short period of time, how transformative it is. I always mention Imad Mustok. He's the founder of Stability AI. And at the end of last year, he published a book called The Last Economy. He said we have 1,000 days left. And of course, that's a stressed statement about 1,000 days because he says, look back at the last 1,000 days since roughly the beginning of ChatGPT. What has happened in these 3 years? What opportunities are out there and which new companies have shot up recently? I mean, Anthropic had a new investment round last week. They're worth a septillion or something like that. OpenAI, yeah. It's really crazy. NVIDIA's valuation shot up from X to 5 trillion. Of course, with Jensen Huang, who's basically built the shovels for everyone, did a great job, but it's really crazy. And Imad Mustok mentions in this book that in 1,000 days, even the concept of economics itself will have to be reconsidered. And here I am. Maybe we were in the past, we were in the present. We'll come back to that in a moment, but let's take another look into the future. Can you even begin to make a statement, let's say, in 1,000 days, maybe in 5 years? For me, a major topic is robotics. If robotics is a big topic, if the robots now get LLMs as their brains and have a learning rate that we've never seen before, and then Elon Musk, okay, you can think what you want about him. You could also take someone else. What if in 5 years, I don't know, we have 1 million plus robots out there? So should we start considering universal basic income? So could you give a gentle yes to that?
Yes.
Could you describe the crisis from your perspective?
Yes. Well, one of the Microsoft CEOs once said that he didn't believe that computers were only for offices and not for households. That's why it's always difficult. Even with, in the past, we've seen that even very intelligent people have been very wrong with their predictions. That's why it's easy to get yourself into trouble with this, but I still think it's exciting to think about it in two different ways at the same time. I think it's incredibly important that we discuss and talk about what a post-labor economy could mean for us. So what if we really end up with mass unemployment, and what do we do with our time? Because we also see that work creates identity. There are theories that crime would also increase because people lose their purpose. Since we get our purpose from work, how many people introduce themselves and say, I'm the manager, or I'm the manager of this or that? Work is part of our identity. So what happens if that's gone? There are so many things to consider. Plus, how would it look financially? Because where would the basic income come from? So it sounds nice if we had an unconditional basic income, but yeah, how is it financed? But the second part, which I would also still like to bring up in parallel. So, what if we continue to be as incredibly good and creative as we have been so far in human history at inventing new kinds of work? If we went back 150 years and explained to a farmer and his wife what we do today, then, on the one hand, of course, they simply wouldn't understand at first because the technical conditions weren't there, but just the fact that we sit on our behinds all day would already be a completely different definition of work for them. Work was, of course, very physical. And I created something, I mean, sure, today we can create PowerPoint presentations. We are creating something right now, but not in the sense of how we understood work and production 150 years ago. And that's why, and we've been very, very good at this so far, also creating new jobs through new technology and further development. And who would have thought that social media would even exist? And when it did, not only did marketing managers and influencers come along who earn more than, I don't know, probably everyone listening here combined. Huge, but maybe they won't exist in the future anymore because maybe that's also a model that's running out. Who knows? Maybe there will be AI therapists like in the book Quality Land by Mark-Uwe Kling, where we have to give therapy to our toaster and ask it why it isn't working anymore, just to exaggerate a bit. So I also always like to bring this up and say, I believe that we have an incredibly good intrinsic ability to create new jobs, for which we then need to justify the need. And by doing so, we create a system in which we continue to maintain our economy. Because who is supposed to buy products in the future if we automate everything and there's no purchasing power left on the consumer side? Yes. And by coming up with jobs, or in other words, by continuing to develop so that there are more jobs and we continue to pay each other, we also maintain, well, it's a balance that has to be maintained. That's why it's interesting to discuss both sides, but I couldn't say that one is more likely than the other.
Yeah, well, I'm torn, really torn. It goes from dystopia to utopia. Right now, everything is possible. One expert says this, another says that. The best thing you can do, as I always say, and you mentioned it somewhere too, is that humans alone will have a hard time, but humans plus AI. And I always say, with the right approach, it really doesn't matter who it is, because then that person is empowered. I just notice how difficult it is to make it clear to many people. I recently had a podcast, and I always like to look at the comments because communication and conversation are important to me. What are people saying? And those aren't bots, they're real people. Like, I listened to you for 15 minutes and then I realized, AI, let's leave it. It's not for me. Next year, when electricity and everything is gone, that's obviously also a huge, huge topic. Sometimes I think we discussed this here at the start. You mentioned those creators, this slowing down. And I'm noticing right now you can, at the moment, it's so hard to slow down, because the whole world is always getting faster and always doing things. And so can we actually afford to slow down right now? Or should we? Since this phase is so intense and we're in the middle of the storm, I know being deep in it feels exciting, but it also makes you aware of the dangers. Do you think that somehow, what if someone just sits back and says, I don't care, like that, I'll just wait a few years now, then the bubble will burst?
Yeah, no, I don't think we can afford that kind of slowing down. But I still see a kind of, and not as a counter revolution to acceleration in AI, but from the aspect where I understand how AI can enable me, how AI can make me more productive, and then my humanity. to bring that more to the forefront, because if I automate my system in the background and see the benefit in it, like, okay, where am I saving time? Then I have more time to sit down personally, for example, to make a video or to take more time to go for a second walk and to just briefly pause this storm that's racing through my head all day long. But I can only manage that because I'm taking advantage of AI right now. And I know right now that in the background, maybe my AI agents, or maybe because I was faster during the day, because of the advantage, I think it's possible for there to be two tracks for things to happen simultaneously. So that's, you heard it in the podcast, Christoph, I really love the word tolerance for ambiguity. Oh, that.
I was just about to say that. I would have slipped that in exactly.
Say it again. Ambiguity tolerance, terrible. Ambiguity tolerance is, so to speak, well, if you just look at AI, I can handle it. That at the same time, I think about the waste of resources by AI, about the planet, about the human brain, about the future of my children. These are all negative aspects of AI right now, and at the same time, I can continue to educate myself and take advantage of AI. And I see it similarly, yes, with speed and slowing down. I can use the speed at the same time and make it profitable for myself, or use it. And at the same time, I can use this time to slow down, to be human on an interpersonal level. And I think we see that very strongly right now on social media, this idea of being authentic. Many influencers are suddenly posting pictures without filters again, showing themselves crying and so on, whereas for the last 10 years, we've only seen face apps. Yes. Authenticity is equated with slowing down, taking time for myself, and figuring out what really defines me. Social media, when I post on social media, I'm not just repeating word for word what I read in an article, but I'm actually making the transfer to share what my own opinion about it is. So it's me as a person and not just a news channel. And that's what I say really defines me as a person and my way of thinking. And I believe that's why both are allowed and possible, but your question, I think what we can't afford is, so to speak, to just sit out and not go along and not learn. Yes.
I also think so. The horsepower that's being put out right now. I always use Anthropic as an example. That's really brutal, of course. But that's also why, despite all the dangers you have to go through, you also have to keep talking about it. It's just too exciting to watch and then to start with small processes. I'm a fan of first principle thinking, where you look at the smallest pieces. Yeah, I actually built something with Cloud Code last week. Say you have those 16 by 9 math videos, 16 by 9, such a wide format. Now I put them in a folder. The topic is creating and sorting folders efficiently. And then I built something with Cloud Code, and well, I still do that manually because I'm now working on the final touches so that the agenda will handle it for me every day. Then it says go ahead. And then it turns it into a 9 by 16 format with the title at the top in black and a red signal format. And then I have 16 math titles at the top. I have the 16 by 9 videos I said. I have them in black and red. I'm sharing math in snippet format and always mention in the text below that all the videos are on YouTube. I also share another course that includes AI. It's no longer in a booked system like Opus Clips, so you'll get 16 videos. Here's another course with AI included, and it's no longer in a booked system like Opus Clips. Unfortunately, they are. It's still great for videos. I'll likely use it for this podcast, and it will create them for me, though you can also do it yourself. But start in small steps, and then it will run. Also regarding the topic of token consumption. Hardly any tokens are burned. You can build it cleverly. You can interact with it. And in the past, an employee would have needed half an hour for that. So, done. I'm satisfied. You can also automate that. Then you have more time again. You shouldn't fall into that trap. Dr. Henning Beck also said that in my podcast. Actually, every technology should give us more time, and yet we have less time than ever. If I then make myself aware, okay, now go take a walk. Yeah, Steve Jobs always went for walks. I notice that when I'm running. Whenever you're running and I don't have any earbuds in, just running, suddenly thoughts come to you where you think maybe you can manage to become aware of it and then really use it in a positive way. And I think that's how you can use AI systems and automation to automate unnecessary processes. To give yourself more time and then also to relax a little. But you have to use these tools. That brings me to the next question. a little away from B2B towards B2C. I'll just call it customer. Students and pupils. Let's start with the students. What would you advise a student who says, yeah, I'm currently studying, let's say, International Business Administration? Finish that. What should I do with AI in this context? Why should I use AI? What should I do with it? Why? For what reason?
Well, I do agree with the big headlines that sooner or later, everyone, every profession will change and come into contact with AI. So that means, on the one hand, you just mentioned business administration. We don't all have to become AI experts. We don't all have to become data scientists or computer scientists. But rather, the field, the subject area we've chosen, hopefully one we're passionate about, where we have talent and can make a real contribution. So because we're both still involved, that hopefully in most cases we find a career field and a path that we can also be passionate about. Because I believe that we're excellent and better at things we enjoy, and then it will become a career field where AI is already set up in such a way that you can already see, okay, we're here, processes have changed compared to 10 years ago. Or you even have students who say, I've really developed a passion for it. I find AI really exciting right now. Maybe you'll be one of those who help shape what this new field of work will look like. So I think right now we have a really, really big creative space where in the past you might have said, okay, I'll just take this one job, or I have a very clear idea of what it looks like. But now I can actually enter a space where I can say, I can actually create a lot of new things. Because we're not just creating new business models, but also new fields of work. And that's why I actually advise, well, I don't really have that much contact with students, which I find really, really unfortunate. It's always the parents who come to me, even after lectures, asking, what should my child study now? Or something like that. How should desperate parents who want to help their children, which is understandable, how should they act? And I always say, as long as there's some kind of passion involved, as long as there's fun in it, and you combine things together, and the openness, this understanding that things will change, and not just the negative narrative we've had for the past 2 or 3 years, especially for young professionals who are highly qualified and have an academic degree, who are actually the group least likely to be hired after graduating from university, that they don't bury their heads in the sand, that they forgive us, that they forgive the economy, that we've just gone through this rough patch and this period of change, not only to achieve this through self-employment, but also hopefully in the future, because we really, really need you. We need you in the corporations. We need your mindset, and that you keep staying involved. Yes, that would be my appeal.
Yes, I think that's good. It's not about your involvement with students, just that you say something. What do you have to do? Because I also see with many people that they say, I'm finishing my degree now and that's good for now. But I say, everyone who, even if it's just Claude in quotation marks and you just play around with it a little every day, gaining experience, I don't know how much longer I can keep saying this. OpenClaw is 6 months old. The first ones who have been working with it from the very beginning are now setting up OpenClaw environments in companies for several thousands of euros. So, of course, there's actually money in it if you get involved with it. It doesn't have to be that way, but I just think otherwise, I don't know, we know something in between. It just gets deeply implemented into both personal processes and company processes. And if you have the skills, that also boosts your chances of finding a job in the first place. Up to the point where you create your own job, you build your own small business, you become your own solopreneur. And with students, I always find that they still have a bit of freedom and time. Yeah, and they're not in such a rigid environment, which brings me to school. What would you advise a typical student now? What would you advise a teacher? And now, completely apart from the fact that the teacher would say, yes, yes, do everything. Yes, don't do it, but just yes. If they're interested, what would you advise them? And I'm not talking about you. Raten. Und yeah, my nieces and nephews are between 2 and 8. Soccer, gaming, going outside, hiking, walking. Yeah. Hiking, walking. Christoph Magnus always does things like that with his kids. I think one is in elementary school and he's already making something with them.
He's already making something. So
if you curate it and do it well and on time, it's okay. Otherwise, I say you little guys out, talk, fight each other.
screen time there.
You learn everything you need, recognizing problems, mastering confrontations, solving them, gaming, and so on. But the closer you get, I mean, when are you mature? Between 12 and 14, the brain is capable and can absorb things. 14, 15, 16. I don't even want to talk about banning social media, when and how. But the closer you get to around 15, 16, 17, then you are there now. I think now they are in upper school. Yes, and they have to do the same things as 10 years ago.
We already said 10 or 15 years ago that we are not being prepared for life in school. And that couldn't be more true today, that we are kind of leaving our children hanging, I think, because we are too slow. So transformation doesn't happen that quickly in companies either, as we've just seen. Politics and education policy, I think, are also difficult. So my appeal, of course, is always, and this is really hard for me because you can still remember your own youth, that ChatGPT is not a cheat code. Because the way it's being used right now, where it's either banned or not part of the curriculum, that's exactly what it's being used for. I have an old system in the form of homework and knowledge checks, which when I do them at home, I can pretty easily just quickly use ChatGPT for. Well, I mean, it's obvious because by now we know, probably. In most cases, you can tell, even if it's handwritten, that it was copied. That's what it is. The students, the kids didn't write it themselves. Everything's fine, but I think that we need to rethink how we understand education so that this knowledge, this testing of knowledge might not be, well, it's maybe outdated now. We set that up about 200 years ago, so maybe we should rethink it again. And that we should focus on skill sets like critical questioning so that AI becomes part of the classroom, that we work with it, question the output. When you use it now and get a text, but that's just one thing, working on tasks with it, questioning them. But the second thing is what? Now I have the possibility to create learning assistants for myself, which means I can learn in a much more personalized way. So, for example, I was the math genius among us because I actually wasn't that good at math. And first of all, I was never interested in it. Why should I calculate how fast this car is driving on this track? Or why this basketball in a certain trajectory somehow goes into the hoop? I just didn't care at all. But if I had maybe had examples that matched my preferences, with examples from my own life reality, if I could have calculated how the dancer, the ballerina, turns her own leg or whatever, maybe I would have been more interested in it. I might have been motivated differently to calculate that, and I have far more options than a standard math book. If I had 5 exercises and still didn't understand the concept, I just tried to do them, and once I finished, thank God, the pain was over. But if I got those 5 wrong, the paper doesn't get any more generous and give me another 5 to practice. Instead, you just move on to the next chapter. And that's why those who, if we're talking about upper grades or advanced students, they say I would immediately pick especially the subjects that I don't really like that much. I would upload all of that, the materials, the worksheets, and say, yes, please give me other examples, give me different exercises so I can practice them in a different repetitive way. Maybe I'll have it explained to me in an audio format, notebook LM. Maybe I'll have a visualization or a video made for it because my teacher once again didn't take the time to do it properly to explain it. We have such amazing opportunities not to cheat, but to learn differently than we used to. And where the school doesn't have the capacity for it. And that's not a criticism of teachers. The system is under incredible pressure. The teachers are under incredible pressure. And now we have the opportunity. That's why I appeal to teachers to bring a bit of openness, to engage with this, but especially now to all students. Yes. Such awesome things. You can really, really learn a lot. And sometimes I think, wow, I know we did that once in biology class, but it didn't really stick in my head because we did it once for the exam and then never again.
I'm totally with you on that. And there's Salman Khan, not the Indian dancer, but the American entrepreneur who founded Khan Academy. I believe it's 300 million learners monthly. And I still remember when he wrote the book School of Tomorrow 14 years ago, describing everything that was possible back then. It took so long for even a few people to become familiar with it. Now, I think 2 years ago, he wrote Brave, Brave New Words.
Great.
Super cool. He worked with OpenAI early on to develop, let's say, a kind of Socratic AI assistant who, let's say, questions you and doesn't just give you a ready-made solution, but guides you to ask your own questions and then learn step by step, which could solve Bloom's 2 sigma problem from the 80s. I just want to say briefly, if everyone had their own tutor, then we would have a 2 standard deviation increase in test scores, and we would all be smart, in a nutshell. And now for the first time, it's possible for everyone to have their own tutor. Just, not everyone can, just like that. I mean, it sounds like build your own assistant, and that finally brings me to Notebook LM because and I can only recommend it, you had the co-founder of Notebook LM in your interview. So feel free to check it out here or just type your name into YouTube. I always say, guys, or do it with your kids, go on YouTube together and watch some great lectures or awesome podcast talks and learn together. And then maybe you'll come across your own talk. Because everything always ends up like Google, evil and data-driven. But then there's this guy, already published maybe 14 papers, who has really thought it through. And Notebook LM. I'll use this as an example. You can take the journey yourselves. I'll try as well. It's sensational. That's just how it is. You, as a person, choose your own sources, then you have sources. Yeah, 1 YouTube video, 10 YouTube videos, a PDF, a website, you put them all in the nice left column. In the middle, based on this data, I don't want to explain the RAG system all over again. You can Google it yourself, but it's based on this data, you get it. You can then chat with it and you can get started and not like you just said, straight to ChatGPT. Here's the task. Let's just finish the solution. Teachers are only looking for an AI to see whether you've cheated or not. But that's exactly where you really start working with it. And then on the right side, that's where the magic happens. You can have a podcast created for you. You can get a quiz, an infographic, a presentation, and that's it. And just that alone. And then before that, do some research. I think if you have a new topic, just use Gemini or ChatGPT, Deep Research, and Claude. Have it search through everything and have the sources listed. Check the sources. Pick your 10 best sources. Put them into Notebook LM and have something created for you. I just want to show you something real quick. I've never done this before. This is actually the first time I'm doing this. I also have the laptop here just so you can see. For example, this is from ChatGPT, and here is a complete analysis of you with everything included. And then I looked through the questions, and then I put them into Notebook LM. Here I had a quick start overview created. That's how it is. So Sarah Rojewski, AI Human Intelligence from Practice to Vision, that's how it is now. In a nutshell, I thought a short, quick overview was good, and then you also learn by doing something, then you read through it. Then I take notes here and learn with it. And then I went ahead. Of course, I also had audio summaries created for me down here. I listened to that on my way to work and like that, today it's about this. The source reference and the coolest thing, I think, wait, where do I have it? Let's see what you say about it. This is the presentation here, and let's summarize it. To experience someone giving you a presentation like that, you have to see it. That was the other thing. Here are hard facts. Here is your vision, your mission. Can you just take a quick look over it? Leitmotif, focus, difference, if you just read through it, here, she is an engaging conversation facilitator because she emphasizes the cultural and psychological impacts of technology, not just the tools. Music to my ears. Yeah, I thought that was really awesome. Then here you have the standard narrative, your narrative, and I have to see if I can show that. This is your journey now, of course. We just checked Vermanskirchen, that's yours now, so business media. But the way it's presented here, such a quick overview, that also has to do with presenting. Sure, you used to be able to design that yourself, draw the arrow, but these are long-term tasks where I say that's super creative, friction points, etc. And then here the questions are listed again. I say, and many people write to me, I've used Notebook LM, yes. And I was excited because you get such a boost for learning. And that's how it is for me. These are the tips that I always try to pass on myself. So you can just get started. And that has nothing to do with evil AI or anything like that. You're not setting the oceans on fire here either. That actively helps you to research better, to still use your own common sense, to learn better, to communicate with others, and to practice all of that. What's possible, and I think those are always such simple, practical things, that's where I'd say that's a mission in itself. That's why I also think it's good that you talk about it on your channels. Like, what is it? How do you use it? You educate people about this whole hype and panic in the market. No, let's discuss this constructively. Because kids sometimes don't even know anymore what's real and what's not. At some point, you can't even tell, right? Like, is this a person or not? But with you, I know you're a real person, yeah. You think about it, you check it at the end of the day, this famous human in the loop. And then I always say, okay, maybe one person checks out other people. Some end up with you, some with Christoph Magnus, others there. But that would already be a good boost. And that's where it is, I think. No matter if you are a school student, a college student, an employee, or in management, you should spend some time really dealing with it and empowering yourself. And I always say, take a look at your screen time and see how long you doom scroll on TikTok and Instagram. I think it's really, really important to mention again and make it clear that I need to train myself to get away from this happy, fun doom scrolling.
Yeah, exactly. And to try that out too. I'm really excited right now, and I'd love to take a look at what you ordered for me. But also, once again, this aspect of using AI, because there's another narrative that says we're getting dumber. We are, because, so to speak, we outsource our thinking because we just let the AI do all the work for us. But this kind of usage, this process you're describing right now, I'm the one who starts it. I'm the starting point. I'm the manager, the female manager of AI. I'm the person, the one who decides what I actually want to work with, what my goal is, what my mission is. There's already so much going on in my head. Before I even actually get to AI, that's the first thing. Then maybe I use AI to speed things up for myself, to do things where otherwise, I mean, we don't have to generate an arrow in PowerPoint anymore. What kind of skill is that? Yeah, we can gladly say goodbye to that. Nobody needs to know how to do that anymore. I can simply choose what goes on it and communicate that. The final step is the best one. And again, with my active brain, this process, human, AI, human, not that many people actually do that, unfortunately. And, or most people haven't yet, haven't understood this rhythm, this way of working with AI in this form yet. And that's why I think it's so important that we start this educational work, especially early with children and young people, that parents have an incredibly big responsibility to do this with their children, because schools can't address this that quickly. Because we can see that through our hippocampus, and that's also an area where we've really declined in recent years. Through social media, through navigation systems, how many people can still find their way around the city without turning on Google Maps? I often say, see, it works. I now try to train my brain with small brain exercises in everyday life, because I know that I also outsource some things. And now I try. Sometimes when I'm somewhere, since I travel a lot and I'm on the road almost every week, I really try when I have to go to a location to look it up just once on Google Maps to see where I need to go and then try to remember it. Another tip is, though I find it incredibly difficult when someone gives me their phone number, even at an event, to remember it and only write it down later. I have them write it down for me on paper, but I don't look at it. Then I try to remember the number, and only later in the evening I try to recall it again and only then type it into my phone. Because how many numbers do we still know by heart today? Back then, I think I actually knew all my friends' home phone numbers by heart because we didn't have cell phones yet. And then you always had to call your friend and say, hello, is this so-and-so? I knew all the numbers by heart. Today, I only know my husband's number for emergencies in case something really happens. So these little things that are combined with proper usage. And we're not there yet. The general public hasn't really internalized that. And then we're talking about behavior. And this AI, this disruption or this integration into our lives has happened so quickly that our behavior couldn't adapt gradually. And now we're basically doing this reverse engineering of what is actually good now. And that's how I respond to AI critics who say we're all getting dumber. Yes, with the wrong usage, I don't even want to argue against that, but with the right usage, we have a very, very good way forward.
Absolutely, exactly. And that's why I say you can say whatever you want. It's simply a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity if you make use of it. And not like always, I know that too, like back then with video learning, oh my goodness, the beginnings, that's how it was. Oh yes, and Mr. Jung is doing exactly the same thing. And the children are getting dumber because that's rote memorization. I say you can do good things with a hammer. You can do bad things. Yes, of course, you can just watch 20 videos before the exam and hammer it into your head. Then you still show that you've learned something. But you can also use it in a meaningful way. I've always seen it as a tool, as a resource, that a teacher might send out occasionally, additionally, and a student might use it selectively at times. Yeah, nobody could have guessed that today. With AI, it's really possible to do it so precisely that you can even get to the right spots in the videos sequentially. It's such a boost for learning, but you really have to approach how to use it, both from the learner's side and the teacher's side. And then you can, like you said, I always say this too, then you can become a creator as well. Because of course you also need the knowledge about it, because if you just leave it to those who are doing it right now, then it doesn't really matter. And that actually brings me to the question, Germany/Europe, based on your conversations and experiences, is there any prospect that Germany or Europe will still play a leading role in the next few years in this field? And I'm not talking about the fact that we obviously have leading scientists. I know many of them myself. I even attended a research school with one of them, whose company was acquired by Aleph Alpha, and now Aleph Alpha has entered into a joint venture with Cohere. But the big players right now are Microsoft, Google, OpenAI, Anthropic, and over in China, DeepSeek, Kimi, Quang, and their companies. Once again, we don't have a leading company like Anthropic, for example. Sure, there's Mistral AI, but it's not really a world player either. As a world player, how do you see the possibilities for the next few years? Is something missing? What's missing? What could we do?
Well, I think there are still some people who say, okay, digital sovereignty has to mean that we've developed the technology ourselves and that it's hosted here and comes from Europe. And I believe that digital sovereignty, yes, definitely, but not in that sense of the technology doesn't have to come from Europe, but rather an infrastructure set up specifically on the server side, that we comply with all our acts that we have, meaning that we follow them because they also have a reason to exist and need to be implemented. That's beside the point, but anyway, basically it's about human values and our dignity. And all that we have in Europe, what is in our European treaty, that we want to replicate that. And this idea is good to begin with, and that's it. But I don't think we can achieve that by claiming that, yes, that's why AI models have to come from Europe. Instead, how do we create an infrastructure with data centers and information in Europe with proper isolation? And then with the data, with the knowledge, with the proprietary knowledge, because I believe that's the topic of science, and our industrial strength. And so if we combine that, then we can continue to be leaders in our industries and sectors. But if we distract ourselves now and say we have to have everything, including the technology and the models, with us, I think we'll continue to lose speed that way. And that one thing doesn't cancel out the other, and that we should keep our sovereignty. But it's also okay for us to eventually accept, like, okay, the leading models probably won't come from Europe. So how can we still manage to ensure this independence? And for me, that would be totally fine. And that's not giving up. It's not giving up, but it's more like a kind of reorganizing, maybe in the short term, but then also with these efforts. How can it work technically? How can we stay true to ourselves as Europeans politically in the setup we're in right now? Because geopolitically, there are no more boundaries. It used to be different. We had clear national borders, but they don't exist anymore. And that's why I think we should rather become users, pioneers in application, and application specialists. And we don't have to be or become the model developers.
I always say, I've said a lot in the last 25 years, and at some point I also said we need a vision fund, but not with just $1 million, right? Let's be serious.
Yes, exactly.
Put in 100 billion faster infrastructure, building infrastructure, simple processes. Of course, you can't just say, I want 10 million, and then you get it instead. And then really put full focus on the entrepreneurs of the future, go in with a lot of capital, and then invest boldly and invest a lot in projects. We're too inhibited. We don't do 500 million or 1 billion rounds or unite entrepreneurs. We have funds, but each founder wants exclusivity, making the capital insufficient. Yes, 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 yes. The money, yes, of course, wasn't made for nothing. Then they come from another generation. And but I don't want to sound pessimistic now. Instead, I want to say, for me, this is, let's say, a last chance in the sense that you can really lift Germany and Europe to the top. That's the topic of further education for everyone. So for students, university students, companies, anyone who takes this AI field seriously now, and not just leave it to those who are intrinsically motivated and say, I'll do it, but actually take a step, right? And every company you reach, there are employees who simply say, we're going to do this together now. We're risking time there too. And it doesn't even have to be extra time. Instead, like you said, we take a bit from company time because we know how EBIT works. And guys, it will help you. It will lead us into the future. And the educated minds are really the last thing we have, no raw materials, etc. That's where I actually see great opportunities. We'll probably talk about that again as soon as the cameras are off, about further training courses in this area because everyone is doing AI courses now. But really, that you really take me by the hand and then say, okay, what do I have to do now? How can I take the next step for myself? For me, it's a time frame from now, let's say. For me, it's 5 years. Anyone who consistently continues their education and really takes action during this time will experience a boost. Yes, and they will experience it on the journey. Because now, probably if someone hears this, they would say, oh, you talkers, and the oceans will be burned. Guys, the energy issue will be solved. Whatever it is, even cold fusion, it will happen. Let Elon fly to Mars, let him build the data centers out there in space, and then it will be done there, but get involved with it. Yeah, and I'm curious about that. That's why I talk to so many people who are now active in this field. Who knows what kind of networking is possible there? And I'll say this as we're slowly coming to the end. I was in Switzerland at an international school over the weekend. I know the principal. And they had career days or career evening, and it was sensational. You could really see that if you approach it the right way. 30 people came together. I was also on stage. There were panel talks. And the people, no one said, I have so many millions. They just shared their stories. There I am again. Maybe things come full circle. Storytelling, then suddenly someone says, very nonchalantly, yes, I was there for 11 years. Right-hand man of Bernard Hinault, who knows me, LVHM, one of the richest people in the world. Really crazy. And the next one says, yes, that was my path. I had no idea about finance at all, but then I founded a fintech company. Just told the story of how they got into it. I found that super interesting. And that's why I'd like to hear again about your personal journey to Google I/O. I'd like to hear more about that because I also find it exciting when you mix sharing knowledge on channels with it. You're on the go and you simply have fun with what you do, and at the same time, you share knowledge. How do you start this journey? Why were you there? How did you get in there? And how was it?
I'm still totally euphoric and I still have a bit of that Silicon Valley vibe in me. Well, about a year ago, I'd only had my social media channel for about half a year. That Google somehow noticed me. And honestly, I can't really say how. And they invited me to the Google I/O Connect here in Germany. So that's always kind of, it's a smaller event and it's not really that big. It's not a huge spectacle, but more like a few displays and developers come there. And then they talk a bit here in Europe about what was shared a few weeks earlier in California. And that's when I happened to end up apparently with the right search result when we were thinking about which content creators we wanted to invite. And my channel wasn't really big at that time. I only had about 10,000 followers back then. And that's where I, for example, met someone named Christopher. So I met a few people there whom I now work with, which was really cool. And that's how it happened that I got involved. And I think I'm really good at networking. So when you're in a conversation and it just goes from one thing to another, I end up talking with a few people. Then a few months later, we were at the Google search event where I also met Stephen Johnson from Notebook LM. And there I had a very nice conversation with Google's communications director. And I think that was always a good combination. And now here we are again. What you mentioned at the beginning regarding timing and combining topics, and then being connected with the right people in the network. And I think that once again, 3 elements came together there, just like several times before in my career. So sometimes people say, you are so lucky. I think it also depends. You have to take advantage of the opportunities or walk through the open doors that are offered to you. And with the communications director, who in the end invited me to California, I had no idea what her position was. And I just had a really good substantive conversation with her. And then one event after another happened, because Google does a lot, of course. And then there was the video, the AI video from Tokyo Hotel, which was generated with VO. I was invited to that event, and then one event after another just kept piling up. And apparently I kept moving higher and higher up on some list. I really don't know in the end how the decision was made. And I do think that because there are really a lot of intelligent people on social media right now who talk about these topics. And I'm not talking about the biggest channel or the one with the most engagement, but that it really depended a bit on this combination on how I convey it, because I have a different background. Then maybe there's also the aspect that you don't just want to have male creators involved. So I think there were several factors. Of course, I was incredibly happy. Honestly, I really, just to be authentic, I really freaked out at home. When I got this invitation, I still get goosebumps now when I was sitting in that amphitheater in the 10th row. And I really thought, like, how a dream comes true when you've been involved in this scene for so long, dealing with this topic, and then you're sitting in this AI keynote that you usually just watch online, like on YouTube. It's really a very, very, very special experience.
I would really, really love to see Demis Hassabis live someday.
And we saw him live.
Demis Hassabis, just to mention again for those who still don't know him. Demis Hassabis is the founder of Google DeepMind, a really smart guy whose company was acquired by Google, and now he leads the entire AI research department. Google is actually responsible for everything that happened there. Great guy. I can talk to him. I can also listen to his lectures. He speaks so intelligently, and he also spoke there. And yes, respect. But that brings me back to something I also heard at the career event over the weekend. Someone said it too. He said, be lucky. First, that's it. And then he says, find your luck. So, and find your luck is, like you said, also a kind of mix. You decided to communicate publicly about what you do. You offer added value, then people will notice you. That's still not enough. You get invited, but then you approach and talk to them with people, and that's this find your luck. Be open, talk to people. No AI can help you with that. I said that weekend too. I told every student there, every pupil, go up to everyone here. Even if you don't have any questions, say, can we connect on LinkedIn? Can we connect somehow? Maybe I'll think of a question later and you talk. And then 3 days later, you remember, I have a question. For example, there was a CEO who owns a vineyard in France. Sensational. No idea. That's not a clear case, but maybe, I don't know, in 2 weeks you want to do something with wine. I don't know. I thought this find your luck was great, and that's exactly what it sounds like. And those are the kinds of skills, communicating, networking. You don't know what's going to happen. So build a strong network for yourselves. I can only back that up. I'm really jealous. I'd love to go there too. Great. Congratulations on your trip. I wish you to get billions of followers, millions of followers, and make the world smarter in this field. I'm curious. I don't know when we'll see each other again. We're going to chat a bit more in a moment. But I also hope that there will be more creators, yes, female creators, who approach these topics in such a fresh way. As I said, it's a great opportunity for Germany and Europe to further educate people this way. We have a great chance. Thank you.
We could have stayed here for hours. I really loved it here.
Yes, me too. I went through a lot here and think we got great input. I'm already looking forward to the clips. It's amazing the things we can use. And yes, thank you very much for your visit.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Thank you. See you then.